A symbol of might, prosperity, and influence, Russia's energy industry once wielded global control, but now fractures are spreading beneath its structure. Imagine, if you will, the very pipelines that constructed an empire are now fueling its decline. Behind the facade of a nation overflowing with natural resources lies an account of mishandling, imposed sanctions, and a rapidly unraveling financial system. Greetings, and welcome to our channel, a new perspective delivering insightful and unbiased evaluations of the occurrences molding our planet. If you favor clarity over clamor, please consider subscribing. In this episode, we shall dissect the concealed forces propelling Russia's energy crisis to its breaking point. Remain engaged to grasp the implications of these events for Russia and the international community. How are Ukrainian strikes targeting Russia's crucial energy infrastructure? The tactical incursions by Ukraine into Russia's energy infrastructure signify a notable development in current unconventional forms of conflict. Employing economical techniques like small unmanned aerial vehicles, Ukraine has effectively disrupted essential functions within Russia's energy sphere. Ukrainian drones have impacted 18 Russian petroleum refining facilities this year alone, possessing a collective capacity of 3.9 million barrels. This purposeful focus on energy systems not only harms Russia's financial stability, but also impedes its military logistics, as energy is fundamental for maintaining operations on the battlefield. Ukraine's reliance on cost-effective drones exemplifies strategic ingenuity. Explosive devices delivered by these contrivances have caused substantial conflagrations and harm to refining plants, storage depots, and generating stations. Analysts from the Kiev Independent emphasize that this inexpensive strategy has inflicted millions of dollars in damages, noticeably depleting Russia's already constrained resources. Choosing to target energy infrastructure directly compromises Russia's war efforts, as gasoline deficiencies limit the mobility of armored vehicles, transport trucks, and aerial craft. These strikes showcase Ukraine's capacity to employ meager resources for maximum disruption, by compelling Russia to depend on outmoded tools and substitute supply routes. The efficacy of these incursions goes past prompt harm. Russia's reliance on Belarus for refined petroleum imports underscores the severity of the dilemma, both economically and symbolically. Furthermore, sanctions worsen these difficulties, further segregating Russia from crucial technology required to mend its energy infrastructure. International responses to Ukraine's strategy are markedly diverse. Western journalists, including those from Le Monde, regard these strikes as testament to Ukraine's strategic innovation. However, Russian state broadcasters like TASS criticize these actions as escalating the conflict and accuse Ukraine of assaulting civilian infrastructure under the guise of military necessity. Concurrently, China's Global Times has advocated for de-escalation, proposing that these strikes may intensify mistrust and impede future negotiations. Ukraine's energy strikes have revealed vulnerabilities in Russia's framework and fiscal standing, questioning its long-term viability in the conflict. While the strikes demonstrate Ukraine's adaptability and determination, they also pose questions concerning the potential for an intensification of conflict and more widespread consequences for regional equilibrium. The circumstances underscore the interconnected essence of energy and military planning, serving as a critical case study in the intricacies of contemporary combat. By aiming at energy infrastructure, Ukraine disrupts both the operational and symbolic foundations of Russia's military prowess. Whether these attempts will bring about enduring gains or ignite further escalations remains uncertain, reflecting the wider unpredictability of the existing conflict. Opinions on these trends differ globally, accentuating the nuanced and multifaceted nature of modern geopolitical challenges. Are sanctions irreparably impairing Russia's energy industry? The Ukrainian assaults on Russia's energy systems have dealt a notable blow, but Western sanctions have intensified the dilemma, targeting crucial components of Russia's energy domain. These sanctions have troubled production, exports, and long-term strategic plans, crafting challenges that jeopardize the sector's sustainability. Sanctions have immensely impacted Russia's functional capacity, limiting access to cutting-edge technology and equipment essential for maintenance and innovation. For example, the Lukoil refinery endured months-long delays in repairing a gas compressor, owing to the absence of specialized components, a task that typically would take weeks. With Western know-how withdrawn, Russian engineers wrestled to maintain outdated machinery, resulting in more shortcomings and vulnerabilities. The imposed restrictions have also transformed Russia's energy export markets. In 2021, Europe purchased 83% of Russia's gas exports, which accounted for 46% of its needs. But these markets are now inaccessible. In response, Russia has turned to consumers such as China and India, but at a substantial cost. These nations command significant discounts, lessening profit margins to historical lows. Analysts estimate that these discounted sales and inflated logistical expenditures have cost Russia billions of dollars annually, draining federal incomes that once leaned on energy exports for 45% of its budget in 2021. This revenue loss has cascading ramifications. Inflation, already heightened by war-related disruptions, continues to rise, and the Kremlin faces escalating financial pressure in funding domestic initiatives and military spending. The circumstances have diminished Russia's financial stability and negotiating power in international commerce. For instance, as stated by the New York Times, China and India have exploited Russia's economic susceptibility to dictate terms in trade agreements, further lessening Moscow's global influence. Internationally, perspectives on sanctions are varied. Western analysts consider them a fruitful strategy to curtail Russia's global sway and war funding. The Kiev Post accentuates how sanctions have compelled Moscow into difficult trade-offs between military urgencies and fiscal steadiness. Conversely, Russian media outlets such as TASS portray sanctions as acts of financial hostility, emphasizing the Kremlin's adaptability and resilience. The enduring ramifications of sanctions are profound. Without access to advanced technologies, the progression of new oil and gas reserves confronts stagnation. Historical analogs, such as the fiscal collapse following the Soviet Union's disintegration, highlight the hardship of rebuilding under such circumstances. Experts propose that unless sanctions are lifted or circumvented, Russia's energy sector risks a downward cycle, endangering its fiscal sustainability for decades to come. What occurs when Russia's oil wells freeze over? Sanctions have undeniably reshaped the dynamics of Russia's energy sector, disrupting supply chains and decreasing access to essential technologies. Nevertheless, another essential result looms: the forced deactivation of oil wells. While sanctions create immediate logistical and financial strain, the long-term hazards associated with oil well shutdowns could compromise the very foundation of Russia's energy-reliant economy. Let us delve into the complexities of this predicament. The deactivation of oil wells represents a severe threat to Russia's energy sector, notably in its frigid regions like Siberia. Unlike brief pauses in production, these shutdowns can result in irreversible damage to vital infrastructure. During the Soviet Union's downfall in 1989, similar shutdowns resulted in decades-long disruptions, with numerous wells remaining offline due to frozen wellheads and damaged systems. This past instance underscores the high stakes of the present crisis. Russia's climate exacerbates these challenges. The severe Siberian winters present a substantial risk, as freezing temperatures can solidify the oil within pipelines and wellheads. This can cause structural damage that is not only costly to mend, but often necessitates complete re-drilling. Such measures are expensive and time-consuming, notably when Western expertise and technology, previously integral to these operations, are now inaccessible because of sanctions. Reinitiating these wells under current conditions presents further obstacles. Thorough inspections, repairs, and the procurement of replacement parts are indispensable. Yet the lack of Western equipment and proficient technicians has left Russia reliant on less efficient alternatives. Reports from the Kiev Post indicate that these delays are compounding production losses, further straining an already overextended energy sector. Each oil well deactivation reverberates across the broader economy. Beyond the immediate loss of production, these disruptions diminish future capability, impacting revenue streams that are critical for government funding. Analysts from Le Monde caution that these losses could create a domino effect, destabilizing public finances and impairing Russia's ability to maintain long-term operations. The geopolitical implications of these deactivations are also profound. Historically, Russia's energy dominance has served as a keystone of its geopolitical sway. However, the forced reduction in output weakens its influence in negotiations with key customers like China and India. Moreover, diminished production capacity undermines Russia's credibility as a trustworthy energy provider, potentially paving the way for competitors like the US and Middle Eastern nations to capture a larger portion of the market. From an international standpoint, views on these difficulties are diverse. Western analysts emphasize the structural inefficiencies that have long plagued Russia's energy sector, emphasizing how over-reliance on aging infrastructure has aggravated its susceptibilities. Conversely, Russian state media such as TASS contend that these difficulties are fleeting and underscore the resilience of domestic energy policies, framing the issue as a chance for self-reliance. The forced deactivation of oil wells is not simply a technical setback. It is a critical weakness that underscores the fragility of Russia's energy industry. With the additional strain of sanctions and the lack of Western know-how, the long-term consequences of these deactivations could reshape Russia's fiscal and geopolitical terrain. While various viewpoints frame the subject differently, the consensus is unequivocal. The challenges are immense, and addressing them will demand extraordinary investment, innovation, and international collaboration, an unlikely prospect under present conditions. Please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It's very important for our content. Don't forget to write in the comments where you are watching us from. Stay with us until the end. The conclusions will be at the end of the video. How is Russia's energy crisis undermining its war effort? The systematic difficulties emanating from oil, well deactivations, and infrastructure damage extend beyond economic repercussions. They strike at the core of Russia's ability to sustain its war endeavor. As energy resources dwindle, the strain on military operations becomes increasingly apparent, creating a domino effect that influences both battlefield dynamics and civilian stability. Russia's ongoing energy crisis has had an immediate and substantial impact on its military capabilities, as highlighted by multiple reports. The disruption to oil refineries and gasoline supply lines has severely limited the mobility of armored vehicles, transport trucks, and aerial craft on the battlefield. The Kremlin's choice to prioritize gasoline for military usage over civilian energy needs emphasizes the essential nature of the situation. However, this approach has ignited domestic discontent as energy scarcities ripple through Russian society. Ukrainian incursions on refineries and storage depots have further aggravated these logistical difficulties. By targeting key energy framework, Ukraine has successfully disrupted Russia's capacity to uphold reliable gasoline supplies for its military operations. Reports indicate that these attacks have forced Russia to rely on alternative sources, including refined gasoline imports from Belarus. For a nation once lauded as an energy superpower, this dependency is both a strategic and symbolic blow. The strain is manifest on the front lines. Russian forces have reportedly faced delays in resupplying armored divisions, with some units unable to deploy effectively due to gasoline shortages. According to the Moscow Times, these limitations have constrained offensive operations, particularly in regions like Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The lack of fuel also hinders rapid troop movement and the transportation of essential provisions, further diminishing combat efficacy. Beyond logistical worries, the energy crisis has weakened Russia's ability to project power. For instance, the reliance on aging framework and antiquated equipment has compounded the difficulties confronted by its military. Without adequate resources to repair or supersede damaged assets, Russia's operational capacity continues to erode. Analysts from Le Monde propose that the decreased accessibility of gasoline and energy has also limited the scope of aerial missions, as aerial craft rely heavily on consistent gasoline supplies for sustained operations. Domestically, the energy crisis has inflamed tensions within Russian society. The Kremlin's prioritization of military needs over civilian energy consumption has led to widespread dissatisfaction. Citizens facing blackouts and heating shortages during harsh winters increasingly question the government's resource allocation decisions. This erosion of public confidence poses a long-term challenge to Russia's capacity to maintain internal stability while waging a prolonged conflict. The impact of the energy crisis on Russia's military underscores the interconnectedness of logistical, operational, and societal pressures. As Ukraine continues to target vital infrastructure and Western sanctions take their toll, Russia's capacity to sustain its war endeavor remains uncertain. This dynamic not only affects battlefield results, but also shapes broader geopolitical implications, emphasizing the far-reaching consequences of energy dependency in contemporary warfare. Can Russia survive the long-term fallout of its energy collapse? Russia's energy crisis represents more than an immediate challenge. It is a long-term peril to the nation's fiscal steadiness and political cohesion. As energy revenues decline and framework deteriorates, the cascading consequences are reshaping Russia's domestic and international standing. Sanctions and limited market accessibility have drastically reduced this crucial income stream. Forced to sell at steep discounts to China and India, Russia's profit margins have plummeted, with annual losses assessed in the billions. This has limited funds for public programs and military expenses, intensifying fiscal pressures on the Kremlin. Framework degradation intensifies these concerns. Shutdowns of Siberian oil wells risk irreversible damage, evocative of the Soviet collapse, when frozen wellheads rendered facilities inoperable for decades. Without Western know-how and technology, reinitiating these wells becomes a costly, drawn-out process, further straining fiscal recovery endeavors. Russia's inflation has reached 99.5% in 2024, according to new weekly data showing that the consumer price index rose by 0.33% in the week leading up to December 23rd. The statistical agency Rosstat rising prices erode purchasing power, fueling public discontent and unrest, particularly in regions heavily dependent on energy revenues. Domestically, the crisis has eroded public trust in the Kremlin. State-controlled media continues to emphasize resilience, but visible shortages and economic hardships narrate a different account. Independent reports highlight increasing protests and strikes, notably in resource-dependent regions like Siberia and the Far East. These areas, already facing infrastructure decay and fiscal disparities, are increasingly vocal about their grievances, raising the risk of heightened regional tensions. Internationally, Russia's diminished energy dominance undermines its geopolitical leverage. Energy exports, once a potent negotiation instrument, are losing their power as Europe diversifies its energy sources. This shift weakens Russia's influence in key regions like the European Union and the Middle East. Analysts propose that emerging alliances with Asia, particularly China, provide some relief, but often on unfavorable terms, further diminishing Russia's global standing. While Russian media frames the crisis as an opportunity for adaptation, Western analysts view it as a turning point that could hasten Russia's decline as a global power. The compounded effects of sanctions, market losses, and systemic inefficiencies depict a stark image of a nation struggling to maintain its footing. Structural reforms could address these difficulties, but such changes are unlikely under current leadership. Russia's energy crisis is not just about declining oil and gas revenues. It is a symptom of deeper systemic issues that jeopardize its economic, political, and geopolitical stability. The long-term impacts of this crisis will shape Russia's trajectory for years to come, leaving observers to question whether the nation can adapt before its challenges become insurmountable. Is there a way out for Russia's crumbling energy sector? Russia's energy sector, once a foundation of its global power, is now under immense duress. Years of underinvestment, compounded by sanctions and geopolitical isolation, have exposed critical vulnerabilities. The route to recovery appears arduous, demanding structural reforms, modernization, and international collaboration, none of which are currently in sight. Rebuilding damaged infrastructure is a daunting challenge. Oil fields, pipelines, and refineries are in poor condition due to decades of neglect. The forced shutdown of oil wells in Siberia risks permanent damage, as freezing wellheads can necessitate extensive re-drill efforts spanning decades. Historical precedents, such as the post-Soviet collapse, illustrate the immense difficulty of restoring capacity without external expertise. Sanctions have further constrained these endeavors by cutting off access to advanced Western technology, vital for Arctic and Siberian operations. While Russia has turned to domestic solutions and partnerships with nations like China, analysts from the New York Times note that Chinese technology often lacks the precision needed for complex energy operations, jeopardizing long-term production. the loss of European markets has forced a pivot to Asia. Purchases in India, alongside others in China and Turkey, have only been lured by large discounts, at times topping $30 a barrel. Analysts from Le Monde estimate that these discounts cost Russia billions annually, eroding revenues critical for economic stability and military funding. Furthermore, China's dominant negotiating position, exemplified by delays in the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, underscores the asymmetric nature of these alliances. Such dependencies reduce Russia's leverage in the global energy market. Domestically, the crisis has intensified economic hardships. Inflation, driven by declining energy revenues, has exacerbated public discontent. Propaganda may obscure the severity of the situation temporarily, but the Atlantic Council cautions that prolonged economic strain could lead to broader unrest as trust in government policies erodes. Experts suggest that recovery hinges on significant reforms, which include addressing systemic inefficiencies and rebuilding international relationships. However, the Kremlin's focus on short-term survival over long-term sustainability limits these prospects. Without resolving the war in Ukraine and recalibrating its foreign policy, Russia's energy sector may continue its downward spiral. Perspectives vary, but the consensus emphasizes the urgent need for innovation and transparency to prevent deeper crises. Russia's energy crisis serves as a stark reminder that even the sturdiest pillars can crumble when overburdened by mismanagement, corruption, and conflict. As we've explored today, the cascading effects of sanctions, infrastructure failures, and strategic missteps have reshaped the dynamics of Russia's energy sector and its global influence. These are more than just political or economic issues. They are human stories of struggle and resilience, underscoring the urgent need for a world driven by peace, cooperation, and sustainability. This channel's content is intended for informational and educational purposes only. While we strive to provide balanced analyses on political and military topics, the views expressed do not reflect those of any government organization or political entity. On our channel, we believe in shedding light on the complexities that shape our world, not to divide, but to foster understanding and inspire constructive dialogue. If today's discussion resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think lies ahead for Russia and the global energy landscape? Your perspective is invaluable in creating meaningful conversations. If you're passionate about gaining deeper insights into the forces that drive global events, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. By subscribing, you're not just supporting thoughtful, unbiased content. You're helping to build a platform for understanding and cooperation. Together, we can explore the stories that matter most and advocate for a world driven by peace, sustainability, and informed decision-making. Hit the subscribe button, and let's continue this journey together. Conclusion. The comprehensive analysis of Russia's energy sector reveals a critical situation characterized by a combination of factors. Ukrainian military strikes have effectively targeted Russia's energy infrastructure, leading to operational disruptions, logistical challenges, and economic strain. These actions have exposed vulnerabilities in Russia's logistical capabilities and military operations, while simultaneously undermining public trust. Sanctions imposed by Western nations have further exacerbated Russia's challenges, restricting its access to advanced technologies and creating significant market disruptions. The forced shutdowns of Siberian oil wells due to sanctions and the lack of Western expertise have led to irreversible damage and significant financial losses. The long-term fallout from these intertwined challenges is severe, potentially jeopardizing Russia's economic stability and global influence. Russia's diminished revenues and geopolitical leverage and its increased dependence on Asian nations, while problematic, have also brought a certain amount of financial relief. The lack of adequate resources for essential maintenance and repairs further strains Russia's operational capacity, and the rising inflation has eroded public trust in the government. The long-term consequences of these issues could potentially reshape Russia's geopolitical landscape, presenting significant obstacles to its long-term sustainability. The path to recovery for Russia's energy sector is fraught with difficulties, requiring substantial reforms, modernization, and international cooperation, which at the moment do not seem achievable. Russia's future economic and political stability depends on its ability to address these challenges effectively. Without resolving the conflict in Ukraine and recalibrating its foreign policy, Russia's energy sector may continue its downward spiral, leading to potentially unforeseen long-term consequences for the nation. Before I forget, let me say this again. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and give us a like, it's very important. And let us know in the comments where you watched from. And be sure to stay with us, because this is very important information. And what's more, we will have more of it in the future.